The winter in Iron Ridge doesn't just arrive, it invades. It's a landscape of rusted steel, gray skies, and the kind of cold that makes your bones feel like they're made of glass. I sat in my study, the heavy oak desk between me and the world, holding a brass key that felt heavier than it looked. To my daughter Elena, I was just Arthur, the man who built half the bridges in this county and retired to a quiet life of solitude. She saw a father who was slowing down. She didn't see the man who was still 3 steps ahead of everyone else. My greatest secret wasn't buried in a bank vault or hidden in an offshore account. It was a sprawling, 3-story industrial warehouse on the edge of the Blackwood River. A relic of the 1950s, a fortress of brick and reinforced concrete. To the local tax assessor, it was Lot 402, a depreciating asset. To me, it was the ultimate litmus test for the human soul. I had spent 40 years in construction, but the most important thing I ever built was a trap for a predator. Elena was my world, but her heart was too big for her own good. When she brought home Julian Thorne, a high-end investment consultant, with a smile that was a little too straight and eyes that never stopped scanning the room, I felt the old instincts kick back in. Julian didn't look at Elena the way a man looks at the woman he loves. He looked at her the way a surveyor looks at a plot of land. He saw the Thorne name as a brand and my daughter as the acquisition that would finally put him in the big leagues here at Family Secrets and Revenge. Before we go deeper into this story, take a second and hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and then let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. I watched them together during that first Christmas. Julian spent more time asking me about the structural integrity of my real estate portfolio than he did talking to Elena about their future. He was a predator in a tailored suit, and I knew right then that the warehouse would eventually be the place where his true colors were finally revealed. The engagement happened 6 months later, a choreographed event at a high-end restaurant in downtown Pittsburgh. Julian made sure there was a photographer. He made sure the ring was large enough to be seen from the street, even if I suspected it was bought on credit he couldn't afford. During the toast, he spoke of legacy and merging 2 great houses, but his eyes were on my watch the whole time. It's during the engagement party, Julian pulled me aside into the library of the club. The room smelled of old paper and expensive tobacco. He started talking about synergy and unlocking hidden equity. He had this way of speaking fast, confident, filled with buzzwords that were meant to dazzle an old man like me. He assumed that because I had gray hair, I had a soft brain. "Arthur," he said, swirling a glass of expensive scotch I'd paid for, "Elena deserves the world, but to give it to her, we need to be smart. I've noticed some of your older holdings aren't performing. That riverfront property, for instance. It's sitting idle. I have a developer friend in New York who would pay 10 times the market value if we just move things along. We could set up a trust. Something I could manage to ensure she never has to worry." I looked him in the eye, letting the silence stretch until he began to fidget. "That building isn't for sale, Julian. It's a storage facility for things that can't be measured in dollars. It's a warehouse of history, and some history isn't meant to be liquidated." He laughed, a dry, hollow sound that didn't reach his eyes. "Everything has a price, Arthur. Some people just haven't heard the right number yet. But don't worry, I'm patient." I realized then that he wasn't just interested in my money. He was offended by the fact that I had something he couldn't quantify. He was obsessed with the warehouse because it was the one piece of my life that didn't fit his spreadsheet. It was the mystery that kept him up at night, the X on a map he hadn't yet learned to read. The marriage went ahead, despite the cold knot in my stomach. I walked Elena down the aisle, her face radiant with a misplaced trust that broke my heart. For the first year, Julian played the role of the devoted husband. He was attentive, he was polite, but I started noticing the small things. The way he would subtly check his phone under the table. The way he would mention cash flow issues in a way that made it sound like my fault. He began isolating her, not in a way she could see, but in the way he managed her time. "Oh, Elena, we can't go to your father's this Sunday. I have that merger to prep for." Or, "Your dad is tired, honey. Let's give him some space. He's getting older, you know." He wanted her away from me because he knew I was the only one who could see through the mask, and he needed her to be dependent on his narrative. At one of our rare Sunday dinners, I decided to plant the seed. I purposely left a set of blueprints on the dining table, blueprints for the warehouse, but with certain sections highlighted in red and labeled high-value storage, level 3 access only. I added a fake inventory list of uncut materials and pre-auction assets. I watched him from the kitchen as he leaned over the table, his pupils dilating. He took a photo of the blueprints with his phone when he thought I was in the pantry. He was hooked. He thought he'd found the secret vault, the hidden treasure that would solve all the problems he'd created for himself. I have to ask, if you were in my shoes, watching a man methodically try to dismantle your daughter's life while smiling at your face, would you confront him immediately and risk her hating you? Or would you let the trap play out? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. By the second year, the mask was slipping. Julian became erratic. My contacts in the city told me he had made some disastrous bets on tech stocks and crypto mining ventures. He was bleeding cash, and his creditors were starting to knock on the door of the beautiful house I'd helped them buy. He needed the warehouse to be his big score. He began gaslighting Elena. I heard the echoes of it in her voice when she called me. Julian says you're being difficult about the estate, Dad. He says you're being paranoid about your old buildings. He was trying to turn her against me, making me look like a senile hoarder who was standing in the way of their financial freedom. I started noticing my home security system being tested. Someone was trying to bypass the digital lock on my study. It wasn't a professional thief. It was someone with a laptop and a lot of arrogance. Julian started dropping hypothetical questions about the warehouse's security. So, Arthur, that old place on the river, must be a nightmare to insure. Is it even alarmed? I'd hate for vandals to get in there and ruin whatever history you have stored. It's built like a bunker, Julian, I told him, barely looking up from my newspaper. The only way in is through the front door, and only one person has the code. And the river is deep enough to hide a lot of mistakes. If someone went in there without the right clearance, they might not find their way back out. He went pale for a split second before forcing a grin. Good to know. Very good to know. Security is everything these days. Isn't it? I knew he was under immense pressure. He was a man who had built his life on a foundation of sand, and the tide was coming in. He'd convinced himself I was hoarding gold or untraceable assets in that building. He didn't realize that the only thing I was hoarding was. The tension reached a boiling point in early November. Elena came to me in tears. Julian had been working late every night, coming home smelling of cheap bourbon and desperation. They were arguing about money, or rather the lack of it. He had convinced her that they were on the brink of ruin because I refused to invest in his latest scheme. Dad, he says you don't trust him, she sobbed into my shoulder in the kitchen of our old family home. He says you're keeping things from us that could help our future. He says that warehouse is worth millions and you're just letting it rot while we struggle. I am keeping things, Elena, I said softly, stroking her hair. But I'm not keeping them from you. I'm keeping them for you. There's a difference that you can't see right now, but you will. I promise. That night I received a notification on my phone. The motion sensors at the warehouse had been tripped. I didn't call the police. I didn't call Julian. I simply opened the live feed on my tablet and watched. There he was, in a dark hoodie, trying to use a thermal cutter on the side entrance. He looked frantic. He looked like a man who had lost his soul long before he lost his money. I watched him for an hour, struggling against the reinforced steel. He eventually gave up, cursing into the wind, but I knew he'd be back with better tools. Well, he was too far gone to stop now. Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts so far on this story below. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in my story, and share your thoughts in the comments. I'm curious to know if you think Julian is truly evil or just a desperate man. I decided to give him exactly what he wanted, an opening. I needed this to end, and I needed Elena to see the truth with her own eyes. A week later, I accidentally mentioned to Elena that I'd be heading out of town to a contractors convention in Cleveland for the weekend. I made sure Julian was within earshot. I even made a show of forgetting my secondary key fob on the kitchen counter when I went to use the restroom. I lingered in the bathroom, counting the seconds. I watched through the crack in the door as Julian's hand shot out like a snake, pocketing the fob. His face was a mask of triumph. He thought he was the master thief. He thought he was finally going to see what was behind the curtain of family secrets and revenge. I didn't go to Cleveland. I drove 5 miles out of town, looped back through the back roads, and parked my truck a half-mile away from the warehouse. I entered through the basement tunnels, a feature I'd never put on any blueprint. I sat in the observation booth on the mezzanine, the lights off, the monitors glowing with the infrared views of the entire floor. The warehouse wasn't empty, but it wasn't filled with gold either. It was filled with the heavy machinery of my past and a few new additions I'd prepared specifically for his arrival. I had set up a series of motion-activated lights and a high-fidelity audio system. I wanted this to be a performance he'd never forget. At 1 a.m., the fob clicked. The heavy magnetic locks disengaged with a sound like a gunshot in the silent building. Julian stepped inside, his flashlight beam dancing across the dusty floor, searching for the treasure he'd promised himself. Julian didn't head for the crates of old tools. He headed straight for the level 3 door I'd marked on the blueprints. He was sweating, his breathing heavy and ragged in the silence of the vast space. Every shadow seemed to make him jump, but greed was a stronger force than fear. He reached the door and pressed the fob against the sensor. The light turned green. He pushed the door open, expecting to see piles of bullion or stacks of cash. Instead, he found a small white room with a single chair and a television monitor. The door clicked shut behind him. The lock engaged. He spun around, slamming his shoulder against the steel, but it was useless. Then a pre-recorded message played over the warehouse's intercom system. It was my voice, amplified and echoing. "Welcome, Julian. I've been expecting you. You spent a long time looking for the secret to my success. Well, you've finally found it. It's in this room." He jumped, nearly dropping his flashlight. He spun around, searching the corners of the room. "Arthur, where are you? This isn't funny. I heard a noise. I thought someone broke in. I came here to check on your property." "The only person who broke in is the man standing in that room," I said, my voice calm and resonant. "You didn't come here to protect my assets, Julian. You came here to steal them. What, you came here because you thought I was a senile old man who wouldn't notice a wolf in his kitchen. But you forgot one thing. I built the kitchen." I flipped the switch for the industrial lights in the main hall. Through the reinforced glass window of the small room, Julian could see the entire warehouse flood with a cold, unforgiving brightness. He stood there, looking small, pathetic, and utterly exposed. If you were in my shoes, standing on that mezzanine looking down at the man who betrayed your daughter, what would be the first thing you'd say to him? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I walked down the stairs, the sound of my footsteps echoing like hammer blows on an anvil. I wasn't carrying a weapon. I didn't need one. I was carrying a leather-bound ledger, the real one. I walked up to the glass window. Why, Julian was screaming now, pleading, claiming it was all a big misunderstanding. I held up the ledger so he could see the pages. "You wanted to see what was in here, Julian? Fine. Look. This isn't a list of assets. It's a list of your failures. Every lie you told Elena, every cent you stole from her savings, every gambling debt you tried to hide, I've been tracking it all. I didn't need a private investigator. I just needed to watch the way you looked at my daughter." I threw the ledger into the mail slot of the door. He scrambled for it, his hands shaking as he flipped through the pages. He found copies of his bank statements he thought were deleted. He found photos of him meeting with the very developers he tried to sell my land to. "I built this warehouse to store the truth, Julian," I said. "Every time I found out something new about you, I put the evidence in here. I wanted to give you a chance to prove me wrong. I wanted to see if you'd ever choose my daughter over your own greed. You had 100 chances to be a good man. You chose to be a thief every single time." Julian looked up, his face twisted in a snarl, the mask finally discarded. "You think you're so smart. You think this matters? She loves me. She'll choose me over some dusty old building and a bitter father. I'll tell her you kidnapped me. I'll tell her you're insane." "Will she?" I asked. I stepped aside, revealing a large monitor on the wall that Julian hadn't noticed. It was a live video feed, and on the other end, Sitting in my study at home was Elena. Her face was streaked with tears, but her eyes were like flint. The silence that followed was the heaviest thing in the building. On the screen, Elena's voice came through the speakers, cold and final. She had heard everything. She had seen him use the stolen key. She had seen the way his face changed when he thought he was alone with the gold. "Julian," she said, her voice trembling but clear, "don't bother coming back to the house. I've already called the movers to put your things on the curb. My father told me I was marrying a man who would protect me. I see now that the only person I need protection from is you. You didn't love me. You loved a shadow of what you thought my father had." Julian slumped against the wall of the small room. He looked like a balloon that had finally run out of air. He had gambled everything on a secret that didn't exist, and he'd lost the only thing that actually had value. He had hit bedrock, and there was nothing left to mine. "I didn't tell her about the warehouse, Julian," I said, looking through the glass at the man who had almost destroyed my family, "because I wanted her to have a place where she could see the truth without the noise of your lies getting in the way. This building isn't a vault for money. It's a vault for character. And yours, I'm afraid, is bankrupt." I opened the door and let him walk out. I didn't press charges for the break-in. I didn't need to. The local creditors found out he was no longer associated with the Thorne name within the hour. Julian Thorne disappeared from Iron Ridge by morning, leaving behind nothing but a bad reputation and a pile of debt. Looking back on this journey, I would love to hear your point of view. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in my story and share your thoughts in the comments. It's been a year since that night in the warehouse. The building is different now. We've cleared out the old machinery and the evidence of the past. Elena and I have turned it into a vocational training center for the people of this county, a place where people can learn to build things that actually last. We call it the Thorne Legacy Center, but not after Julian. It's after the family that actually stayed to do the work. Elena found a strength she didn't know she had. She realized that being protected doesn't mean being kept in the dark. It means having the tools to see the light. She's the director of the center now, and she runs it with the same meticulous attention to detail that I used to build it. We sit on the mezzanine sometimes. I like watching the students below, and she'll squeeze my hand. "I'm glad you kept the warehouse, Dad," she told me recently as the sun set over the Blackwood River. "It's the only place I ever truly learned how to see. Thank you for staying with me through this story of deception and justice here at Family Secrets and Revenge. This tale is a reminder that the most valuable things we possess aren't the ones we can sell. They're the truths we're willing to defend. If you found strength in this journey, please take a second to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Share your overall thoughts on this story below. I read every single one, and your support is what allows us to keep unearthing the truth. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay true, and keep your secrets where only the worthy can find them.